Thanks, Jack. That was great. Even though he's got weaponry on his T-shirt, I don't know if you saw that. It's like, but at least in that case, it's one that, yeah, go for it, you know. I was thinking about this week, why more people don't give talks that include stories of Native Americans, and I just realized it this morning, because they never end well for the Native American. It's kind of not bittersweet, just tragic. But I am going to end, no matter what I say, I want to end on an up note this morning. So if it gets late, story this morning, it occurred on the journey of Lewis and Clark. And how many are familiar with that story from high school, hands down, college? Careful, I'm really interactive. I will call on you. Can somebody tell me why Lewis and Clark are so famous? Not Lois and Clark. I know you're thinking. I saw that show. I really liked it. No, Lewis and Clark, 1805. They were explorers. And the piece of ground we just bought from France was called the... You guys are doing great. There will be bagels afterward. So here Lewis and Clark had to head up the Missouri River to explore what we just bought. The only trouble was they really didn't have good maps to go by, and once they were past St. Louis and up the road a ways, up the river a ways, they were in Indian territory. And if it's okay, I'm going to use Native American and Indian interchangeably. The literature and the websites still are filled with both, so no disrespect intended. But they were headed to Indian country, Native American country. They knew some of the tribes, but not all the tribes. They knew basically where that Missouri River went, but not really where it started. And they had to get there quick. The Spanish were moving up from Mexico. The English were moving down from Canada. The Russians, yes, the Russians, were establishing bases on the west coast of what we now know as the United States. So they had to get there. Now, I don't know how you grew up, but as a boy, I grew up loving Indians. And it was 1960s show Daniel Boone that really did it for me. Okay, just a show of hands, how many? Not on Cartoon Network, but the real, you remember those? Okay. I remember getting that coonskin cap for Christmas. I was going to wear it. I think my wife threw it out. I'm just going to. And there was Fess Parker, always, you know, Daniel Boone. In the 50s, he was Davy Crockett. I'm too young for that. I don't remember those, but I remember him as Daniel Boone. And Fess Parker, I was sure that after he retired, he would just build a log cabin somewhere in Tennessee. Do you know what he did after he retired? He built a winery in California. Yeah, you can... betrayed us all. Sipping Cab Sav out there in the Napa Valley. Anyway, but it wasn't just the things on TV. Coming from Western New York, it is full of Native American culture. My grandparents actually lived right next to the Tonawanda Indian Reservation in Genesee County, upstate New York. And upstate New York is Seneca land. I know Ohio is filled with Native American lore too, with names like Cuyahoga. But we had Tonawanda, Seneca, Cheektowaga. Try to say that. That was our school district. But my grandfather would always tell us stories, and when we'd go to visit him out in the country where he lived next to the Indian reservation, he would look at my sisters sometimes and tell them that if they misbehaved, he was going to take them to the reservation and sell them to the Indians. And they would squeal and run away. And I always thought, what would the Indians do with my sisters? And then the second thought always was, I wonder how much we'd get. But I remember one day out behind his garage, there was a stream that ran right behind his garage on the other side of the street. And I was looking at this creek, this stream that ran by. And he comes over, and he was very affable. And he said, "Do you know what the name of that stream is?" And I said, "No." He goes, "You want to know?" "Yeah. It's called Murder Creek." I thought he was making it up because my grandfather did make stuff up all the time. I'm going to just take this out. I'm breaking a rule, I know, but I have to do this. He would make stuff up all the time. He did not have the air of authenticity about him. The air of my grandfather was usually Jenny Cream Ale, something like that, But he was a good guy. And then he told me the story about what happened along this stream years and years and years ago, according to him, where this Native American princess named Wild Rose loved this other Native American man, Indian Seneca. His name was Gray Wolf. But of course, a white guy got in the middle of it, wrecked things up, and got the okay from Wild Rose's father, the Seneca chief, to marry him, and there was a struggle along the river, and the white man was fighting with the Native American man, and they killed each other. I think I saw that in Shakespeare somewhere, I'm not sure, but they killed each other, they were buried, and then Wild Rose goes to the grave of Gray Wolf, and she dies of a broken heart. Yeah, you can say, "Oh, that's sad." And he says, "Well, that's not the important part," my grandfather was telling me. He says, "Even today, people say that when they walk along the banks of this river, especially at night or early in the morning, they can see and hear the two lovers calling and looking for each other." Wow. I don't think that's really true, but that's a true story. And I remember getting out of the car every time we would go to visit and thinking, "Oh my gosh," and I would run down to that stream. But as I got to the bank, I started walking really carefully because I did not believe in ghosts. 99% sure I didn't believe in ghosts. Anyway, that's not the story that's going to be on the test. I just wanted to throw that in there. So Lewis and Clark journey up the Missouri. They come to the Mandan villages. They find a French trader who they hire, thinking he might be of value. His name is Toussaint Charbonneau. And his wife, does anybody know who Toussaint's wife is? Very famous. Sacagawea. Oh, man, 2 bagels back here, 4th row. So they get Sacagawea or Sacagawea, depending on the pronunciation. And they hire them. She's 16 years old. She's pregnant. In the middle of the winter, she has a baby. But in the spring, baby, husband, Sacagawea, and 30 white guys head upstream. She becomes invaluable. Anybody know why she was so valuable? I mean, we put her on our first gold. Because she knew there was a microphone in the podium. How's that? She was.
But that's right.
That's right.
She could talk.
She could talk. She could speak Native American languages. She could speak French. And she was, I'm really testing you now. Maybe I'll pick on the college kids. How many do we have here? 1. Okay. How'd you do in Western Civ? Never mind. I won't pick on you. Anybody know what tribe she was from?
Shoshone.
She was Shoshone. Who yelled it out? Douglas. An upstate New Yorker? All right, yeah, okay. She was Shoshone. And one thing they knew is that the Shoshone had horses. They knew they were not going to get over the Rocky Mountains without horses. There's just no way that was going to happen, so they needed horses. So in one of the most amazing stories, and this is not the story I even want to tell you about, but this is another amazing story, that they finally tracked down the Shoshone tribe, and it's a nighttime meeting, and they are trying to trade for horses that the Shoshone have many of. And there's a stone-faced, quiet chief named Kamiawait. And he's not budging. He's not wanting to give these white men any of his horses. And finally, from the shadows, she was translating in the background, she comes forward and looks at the chief Camille Waite and realizes that it is her own brother. And there's this unbelievable scene where they embrace. They have not seen each other for years. She was separated from her tribe many, many, many years ago. And all of a sudden, horses are no problem for Lewis and Clark. And they move on from there. They cross the Rocky Mountains, which again is an amazing story in itself. No white Americans at the time had ever even seen the Rocky Mountains, let alone try to cross them, looking for that trading route from west to east. They barely make it through. They cross in September, a lot of snow. They hire a Shoshone guide to get them over. They're eating roots and a little dried salmon. And no one dies. And this another amazing factor of this whole journey is that even though they don't die, they're very sick. They're used to eating on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. They were eating, according to the journals, about 9 to 12 pounds of meat per man per day. And the journals of Lewis and Clark are the basis for Stephen Ambrose's book, Undaunted Courage. I don't know if anybody's read that. And that's the one book title I can recommend this morning by Stephen Ambrose, all about the journals of Lewis and Clark and the unbelievable stories along the way. So they're eating roots, eating dried fish, and they stumble into the camp of the Nez Perce. Up in the Bitterroot Mountains, up in Idaho, in the fall of 1805. They are weak, they are sick. To be perfectly honest, according to the journals, they're extremely flatulent because of all the roots. I'm just painting the whole picture, Karen, just the whole thing. See, you are going to miss this when you're in Florida, yes, or not, I don't know. And they need something. They need food. They need shelter. They need someone to take care of their horses, and they need someone to show them how to navigate the rivers of the West. These are all things that the Nez Perce could do. One little problem, the Nez Perce men have never seen a white man before. And so they stumble into camp, looking sick, looking like ghosts with hangovers. Editorializing mine, not Stephen Ambrose's. They did carry something, however, that the Nez Perce wanted. The Nez Perce needed guns, because even in 1805, many of the tribes on the east side of the Rocky Mountains had guns. The Great Plains Indians were getting them down from the French from Canada. And not only did they use them in their annual hunts of bison, they were using them against their enemies, which at that time were other Native American tribes. The Nez Perce, on their annual trip over the mountains for their annual buffalo hunt, were at an extreme disadvantage, very vulnerable, and their tribe had begun to take many losses. And here comes these 30 men stumbling into the tribe, into the camp of about 200 braves, 30 of them, but they're carrying with them the largest arsenal west of the Mississippi. This would not go unnoticed among the Nez Perce, eyeing those guns, thinking of the odds. And so at a late night meeting in the chief's lodge, they decided what to do. They were just going to dispatch with the white people. Wait till they went to bed, fell asleep, overcome their 2 pickets, and get the guns. And if that would have been the case, you or I would never probably even have heard of Lewis and Clark. Maybe a little asterisk, footnote. Maybe that would be better. We're not voting, okay? Because many times I think, yeah, that would have probably been okay. Bought a couple more decades. But in the midst of this, the buzz is going around camp of what's going to happen. An old woman makes her way into the lodge. And her name is Watkuweis. And Jack, you did a great job pronouncing it today. Maybe you could just say it with me, Watkuweis. You'll remember it more as we say it. She comes in, and her very name means one who has come from afar. And it's not a fictional story, it's a true story where she comes into them and says, we can't do this. And all of a sudden, everybody turns around, the chief, the elders, the braves look at her and go, why not? And then she tells them the story that many of them were familiar with, the story of her own tragedy, where at a young age she was captured by the Blackfeet or the Crow, I can't remember, one of them, and eventually sold to a French man and his wife. And although she was a slave in bondage, they were kind to her, and they showed her many kindnesses. And even as an old woman, she comes in and says, because of the kindnesses shown to me, we must show kindnesses back. We can't do this. And everyone looks at each other in the lodge and goes, okay, we won't. And Lewis and Clark get a good night's sleep. Not exactly the golden rule, but definitely a derivative of it, where kindness is shown to us are required to be given back, or treating others like we have been treated or would desire to be treated. The golden rule is the timeless rule of reciprocity. Christians may claim it of their own, but it predates Christianity. And I wrote down a few references. In 30 BC, Rabbi Hillel said that what is hateful to you, don't do to one another. It's the whole law. The rest is commentary. From Hindu writing, 400 BCE, one who regards all creatures as their own self and behaves towards them as his own self attains happiness. 1400, out of the story of the Exodus. Don't oppose the foreigner, for you well know how it feels. You were in that land. There's a story out of Egypt, 2000 BC, the story of the elegant peasant. And probably oldest comes down from caveman times. In one episode, Fred Flintstone I think it's true. I think it was on the Rosetta Stone, so I think it's true. Fred Flintstone does come upon a stranger and helps him, and somebody says, why'd you help him? He goes, well, I'd want him to help me. So, I watched a lot of TV in the 60s, you know. The golden rule is in our DNA, or at least it's fixed there through social evolution. We've come to believe and accept that we can always do more good together than apart. There's a negative and a positive version. Don't do unto others the things you would not want them done unto you. Do unto others. Do unto others before they do unto you, in a negative sense, not a plausible derivation. Confucius says, this rule should be practiced all day, every day. How do we do that? That is a great question. That's a great question for a small group meeting. How do we do that? Maybe we can dethrone self. Maybe we can reorient our own universe. I was thinking of Galileo. I was thinking after he confirmed and set apart for all scientific reasoning that the sun does not go around the earth, but the other way around. After the heliocentric theory was confirmed, people woke up the next day, everything looked the same, but in some ways everything was different. It was a reorientation. How many of us in this room practice some sort of transcendence or meditation or mindfulness? Could you see a show of hands? Wow. That would be another great topic for a message, Jack. But I was thinking, as to confirm the golden rule within ourselves, maybe to transcend ourselves would be the way to go. The goal of meditation is not to lose yourself, but to transcend yourself. Not abandon it, not lose, but become mindful of yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. And with this perspective of self, we have a chance to become untethered from the knee-jerk reactions of self-interest, freeing ourselves from that baby inside that just says, me, 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 all the time. The golden rule is a rule. I wouldn't necessarily call it a philosophical principle, like the principle of the greatest good. I remember in Ron's talk a few months ago on, where am I? Utilitarianism. That's a big word. I couldn't remember that. It's not a principle so much as just a rule. If I were a computer, it would be my operating system. If a compass, the golden rule would be my true north. If I was a football team, it would be my starting quarterback. The golden rule doesn't ask us to love. It's not about loving your neighbor as yourself. That's a pretty high bar. In fact, I don't think there's anything in either our 7 principles that talks about loving. I'm not against loving, by the way. It's a good thing. We love each other. But it's not required. But when I love myself, I can expect that another is worthy or deserving of love, or the social face of love, which is justice. And that is a conditioned response. Normally, we interpret the golden rule as telling us how to act, but in practice, its greater role may be psychological, alerting us to everyday self-absorption and the failure to consider our actions and how it impacts others. The rule reminds us that we are peers to one another and they deserve consideration. It suggests a general orientation towards others. The golden rule flies in the face of selfies, stand your ground laws, and that disorienting belief in American exceptionalism, invading countries because we think they might be up to something. And just for the record, it's okay for us to say that we love our country. But I think maybe when we cross the line is when we say, my country is better than your country. And when I was teaching social studies years back, I always taught my kids, when they would say, what's the difference between patriotism and nationalism? And patriotism says, I love my country. Nationalism says, my country is better than yours. But why is this so hard today? Why can't we do it more often? And I don't really have an answer for that other than let's try. And I'm talking way too much, so let me wrap it up. In 1877, actually exactly 72 years after the kindness is shown to agents of the government, and 2 years before the Nez Perce Chief Joseph journeyed to Washington, another group of agents from the U.S. government paid a visit, and Jack alluded to them. These U.S. cavalry soldiers had no knowledge of Watkuweis. They were not there to return hospitality, offer words of thanks, or they weren't arriving as ambassadors of an enlightened society. They were there just to do unto others. The expedition of Lewis and Clark and the country owed much more to the Nez Perce than was ever acknowledged. And so the U.S. cavalry, carrying out the government policy, drove Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce from their Idaho homes, hunting down and killing those who would not leave as ordered. And just ending on a personal positive note, last year my daughter, who lives in Brooklyn, ventured out to Manitoba to participate in Sundance. And those of you familiar with Native American culture know Sundance, it's not the film festival, but a festival held annually by Plains Indians of renewal, rejuvenation, getting in touch with the spirit. And most of them are closed, but she found one that was open. contacted the elders of the tribe and asked if she could come out. So she went with her partner, and they headed out there. And she said it was the most amazing thing she'd ever been through. Here was a tribe of Native Americans living in meager surroundings, opening the doors to whoever wanted to come and to be part of their tribe for a week, to be able to reach out to the Great Spirit together and to purify themselves together, knowing that under the sun, under the Great Spirit, they were all brothers and sisters, which is amazing. And so she's heading out again in 2 weeks to be part of that again. And in just talking to her, I always just get a little bit of that spirit. Thank you.